Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we're joined again by Jean-Pierre Parent. He is author of 3 books on the kitchen farming series, or should I say kitchen sink farming. And we're going to be talking today about how we can easily and cheaply ferment our own food. Jean-Pierre, thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Now, let's talk about how you came to create these series of books. What I love about them is the simplicity of what your message is, and that we can all actually begin to grow sustainably our own food in something as small as a one-bedroom apartment. How did all this start for you?
Well, you got it exactly right. We can grow and ferment and sprout most of our own food, from just a really, really small work area. I mean, literally a couple of shelves will do it. So I was living in Los Angeles as a struggling writer, and I, was just having a lot of trouble finding work and making money. And so I decided to try a little project, which was to, go through everything, like all the grains and seeds and beans and stuff in my cabinet, and just get rid of everything and try to clear out some space, save a little bit of money. So I started sprouting things because I knew that would increase the biomass and the nutrition, and it was amazing. I ate so well. I wanted to just keep going with it. I've been fermenting kombucha for many, many years, and so I added that in, and it just turned into a little laboratory in the hills of Hollywood. And lo and behold, I also happened to start feeling incredibly great. I noticed that my athletic performance was going up. I was sleeping less. My mental acuity and clarity had increased. So people started asking me, what I was doing. I would give them little tips and hints here and there. And then when I started sending the same email 10, 20, 30 times, I decided, okay, I'm going to just start copying and pasting this to people. And then I thought, I should probably maybe record this in a book format so that I can get it out to more people. So that's what I did.
Now, it's really fascinating because as you read this, there's a lot of history that you like to put into your books and, what we're doing above and beyond and coming to learn just how simple this really is.
Yeah, well, I'm a curious character, and I think it's really important to find as much meaning as we can in the things that we're doing to motivate us to continue moving forward. So, especially at the beginning when people might not be seeing the results or having some challenges with some of the, techniques, like not that it's complex at all, but we can make it complex. But, when there's any sort of resistance that comes up from the outside of the inside, it's nice to have a little background historically or scientifically or just, the promise of some more fun.
Now, let's talk about your book here, Easily and Cheaply Ferment Your Own Food. Now, what is fermentation? Why is this important? This goes beyond just storing food for a long time, isn't it?
Yeah, it does. So that is how it started before refrigeration, which is a very new development in the history of humanity. People started fermenting stuff because it would preserve it. They didn't understand why, but we realized that if we bring stuff under 4.6 pH, then C. botulinum, the bacteria that causes botulism, can't grow. The reason is because other bacteria have made it an unfriendly environment for botulism. And it just so happens that we have created this amazing synergistic relationship with these bacteria, which we call good bacteria. There's really no good or bad, but we just happen to get along really well with them. So we use them to ferment stuff, sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha, jun, whatever it is, and it preserves it. So that's pretty fantastic, but it also preserves us, and it adds all sorts of wonderful probiotics and nutrients that are created in the fermentation process to just make us way healthier. Plus, it's just so much fun.
Now, let's talk about some common fermented foods that people might be familiar with, and then ones that they may not be so familiar with, and why it's important that we kind of begin incorporating this into our daily routine, I suppose.
Definitely. How about some super familiar ones? Coffee, tea, chocolate. All of these foods are fermented. It's a necessary step in the process of making them. So absolutely everybody is comfortable with fermentation already. So the next step of that might be some of the things I mentioned: yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha, etc. And these are things that are readily available in stores, but they can be kind of expensive. And so it's really inexpensive and really easy to do it yourself. It's like you're paying a tax, like a learning curve tax, when you go buy a $10 jar of sauerkraut at the store. And then you find out how easy. Yeah, exactly. And you can make it at home in huge batches and play with all different kinds of flavors. Make it taste just like the delicatessens that you remember growing up in, Brooklyn or whatever it was. And it's just so fun and easy.
I know the interesting thing about sauerkraut when you buy the store-bought versus when you begin to actually make this on your own is there's quite a taste difference. One, it's not as vinegary tasting, and it seems lighter as well.
Yep.
Now, talk about some of the benefits you had mentioned. I believe it was kombucha tea. Tell us about that.
Yes, well, I would be happy to. That's actually my main business right now. I have a company called Simple Foods, Symple Foods. It's a play on symbiotic. And we make Soma kombucha, which is becoming one of the most popular kombuchas in Portland, and we distribute all over Washington and Oregon. So that is my main focus and why I'm in a big truck on the side of a road right now doing this interview on my way to doing some deliveries. So kombucha is fermented tea. We start off with tea and sugar. Soma uses evaporated cane juice, but you can use any kind of white sugar at home, and you add this special culture of bacteria called kombucha. It's like 30 different probiotics, and there's some yeast in there as well. They digest the caffeine, they digest the sugar, and they make this living health elixir, which is great for digestion, immune system, mental functioning, joint hormone balancing, all these things. And it happens to taste super delicious. It's like a healthy probiotic soda.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because this is something that people can begin to do in their home. Tell us how easy it is to make something like this.
Well, it is pretty easy. There's a learning curve for making it taste good. So all you do is, you can look it up online, but just the right amount of tea, the right amount of sugar, cool it down so that the bacteria won't bake, won't boil and die. Then you can add a starter of kombucha, which is pretty readily available. You can find it at brew stores or at natural food stores or buy it online. You can even, if you have an unflavored bottle of authentic kombucha, which is actually pretty rare to find these days because most of the big companies are using just a partial culture. So you can only ferment it one time and then it'll stop. But if you can get some from a neighbor or something like that, add them all together, cover it so bugs can't get in and it can still breathe, and just let it be on the counter. It might take a week, it might take 2 weeks, and then just keep tasting it. And when it gets kind of acidic and kind of a little effervescent and just delicious, kind of tastes like apple, pear, then you're ready to go. If you let it go too long at home, it's going to get vinegary, like you mentioned the sauerkraut being. That's just more acidic. So it's still super healthy. It's just different groups of probiotics have taken over, and it's maybe a little bit harder to drink. You can mix it with sparkling water or with juice, use it for salad dressing. Something that's really special about Soma kombucha is that over the years, all my tweaking with the kombucha recipe helped me figure out a way to brew for several months without making alcohol. Alcohol turns into vinegar, so it tastes really good, but it also has millions of times more naturally occurring probiotics than any other brand that you can buy, or even what you can make at home, because it's not producing vinegar, so it's continuing to ferment for months. And honestly, I would say most of the kombucha that you can buy in the store is better than drinking soda, but not a whole lot. They do a quick week fermentation, artificially carbonate, stick it in the fridge. We get all kombuchas tested for probiotic content, and unfortunately, almost all of them are really close to zero. Then there are the big companies like GT's in LA, which is a great company, but they have a really massive distribution thing to figure out. So they can't make real kombucha. They add probiotics to like a kind of partially fermented artificially carbonated water juice thing, and then it still has probiotics. It's fantastic, but part of the benefit of drinking kombucha is all the nutrients the probiotics make. So if you can't drink soma kombucha, I would definitely recommend that you make it at home as soon as possible.
Not to mention, too, you can save a lot of money by making it on your own as well.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's why I started making it. I was buying a bottle of GTs every day. Who can keep that up?
Yeah, and they run like, $4 or $5, $6 a bottle sometimes. It's pretty amazing how much that stuff is. Now, what's interesting when you talk about probiotics and this company that actually adds probiotics to their drinks is that you talk about how you began to experiment with the probiotics that are on the shelf. We're talking, pharmaceutical-grade probiotics here, and you found some interesting discoveries about how alive or maybe unalive that food actually was.
True. Yeah. Well, I've taken lots of stuff to the lab to get the probiotic content tested, and I'm actually really excited about this test because it's inexpensive. Anybody can do it. Probiotics are one of the keys for wellness. I mean, I talked about the benefits of kombucha before. Immune system functioning. Almost all of that is the result of probiotics in your digestive system, so that's huge. Mental functioning or mood elevation. 95% of the serotonin that we produce in our body, the neurotransmitter that we need for happiness, is produced by bacteria in our digestive system, 95% of it. So that is just absolutely huge. So probiotics are just the key for wellness. So anybody can take their favorite kombucha, their homemade sauerkraut, their probiotic supplement that is $50 a bottle, to a food science lab, say they want a CFU test, which is colony forming unit, and they'll test it for them. It might be $10 or $20 or something like that. They might need a few samples to make it, worth their while, but anybody can do this. So I've taken every probiotic supplement that I can find or that people bring to me and tell me is the best, get them tested. None of them are even remotely close to what they say they are in the label, and a lot of that can be because of shipping, because of the way it's handled in the store or something like that. But what's important is getting probiotics in you. So 3,000 CFUs per gram is what GT is scored at, okay, the second highest kombucha. Everything else is like 0, 50, 100, something like that. The GTs with their added probiotics, 3,000 per gram. Soma kombucha, 6 to 8 million per gram, so that's awesome. But our homemade sauerkraut was about 350,000 per gram. So inexpensive, so easy to make. So anybody can have access to that, Really excited about it. And actually, there's a part of our website, simplefoods.com/probiotics. It talks about getting this test. It talks about how our company will subsidize people doing their own testing of probiotics, just so that we can build a really large library of exactly what's going on in the probiotic world. Pretty excited about it.
It's pretty fascinating, too, to think about the fact you can make this at home, that, as you're talking about probiotics, that you actually increase superfold, I guess is the best word to use, probiotic content, versus what they're putting out there. Now, anybody who's went out, I'm sure, and bought probiotics, I know my wife used to, that can get pretty spendy per bottle.
Yeah, they're super expensive. I'm not really sure what that whole deal is. There's a probiotic liquid that's sold. It comes from Denver, Colorado. The company is Inner Eco, and it's a coconut kefir. And it's $20 a bottle, 15 ounces. It's supposed to be 8 billion probiotics per tablespoon. We got it tested. We found out that it was 1 million. I wrote into the company, and I was like, okay, explain something to me. You can only kefir coconut water to a certain point. So how are you making these massive claims for probiotics? Are you reducing it, under a vacuum so it's low temperature so that you're increasing the concentration? Doesn't seem any more viscous, so I don't think that's what it is. Are you producing probiotics on a substrate and adding them to coconut water? Explain to me what you're doing, because I don't know everything. I don't see how it's possible, but, explain. So they wrote, we have a proprietary technique that we don't tell anybody. I said, okay, that's totally fair. It's business. I get it. Everybody's got their hustle. So then we got it tested. I found out what I found out. I wrote back and I said, hey, and I took a look at your lab results because I'm getting something really different. I want to believe you. I want to believe that your labeling is accurate. And they never answered. I wrote several emails.
Isn't that typical? They got the secret proprietary method that they can live up to their claim, although the tests show that they're not even close to the claim they're making.
Well, Daniel, I really, really hope it's not typical. There's so much greenwashing, and there's so much, so many maybe over-enthusiastic labels out in the world. I happen to take this really seriously. I think that people's health and their probiotic content, their immune system functioning, so, it increases the parasympathetic nervous system response so that they can be relaxed and open-hearted in their life. I happen to think this is one of the most important things that is going on in society, people being happy, fulfilled in their life, nice to their kids. And so, I feel like it's a massive, massive responsibility when somebody's walking around a grocery store looking for a way to feel better, that putting something that's a blatant lie, or maybe we don't take as much care to make sure that the label matches what's inside, I feel like that is something that needs to be addressed.
Mm-hmm. Now, the thing that people need to understand about your series of books, Kitchen Sink Farming, is as you describe this individual who's perusing the aisles, looking at labels that may promise something to them, is that your books tend to steer us away from having to really look at labels in the first place.
You mean because we make stuff ourselves?
Exactly.
At home? Yeah, it's true. It's so true, yeah. So the point about this sauerkraut being 350,000 CFUs per gram, I mean, that's huge. Anybody can do that. Literally any family can afford to make sauerkraut and experience all these benefits. So, pretty awesome.
Now, you mentioned coconut kefir, and I want to bring kefir into the fold here because it wasn't just but a couple of months ago that I'd first heard of kefir, interestingly enough. And when I did, I was like, my goodness, this is unbelievable. This is like God's miracle somehow. Now, interestingly enough, we were up at a farm in Washington, and we stayed overnight, and this is a lady that likes bringing people who are interested in farming from around the world. They can stay on the farm, and
cool.
They trade work, and in trade, they've got a place to stay and food to eat, that sort of a thing. But she really gets back to basics. One of the things she gave us, and we didn't understand at the time really what it was these kefir crystals. And she explained what you do is you throw these in water, sugar water that is, and here, taste this. And the taste that we had, it tasted almost like regular sweetened tea, but not with the black tea taste, so to speak. But that's what it reminded me of. Pretty refreshing. But what we really didn't get explained to us was what exactly was going on here with these kefir crystals and what they were doing to the sugar water. Tell us more about what kefir is.
Sure, yeah, well, just like you said, kefir is a group of probiotics, just like kombucha is, just like an apple cider vinegar mother is. So it's a special group of probiotics, and they have a certain food that they like, which is sugar. And they actually are pretty, agnostic about the type of sugar that they like. They can do juice, maple syrup, palm sugar, whatever it is. So you add this to their food, they ferment it, and they make, a healthier beverage for you. Kefir is pretty simple in what it does. It only takes a couple of days, but it's really fun to do, and it's a really, delicious end result. I'm a big fan of kombucha, or Jean is another one. It's a little bit more complex in its nutrient profile from what it produces. It takes a little bit longer, and I feel like there are more health benefits. But just for, any probiotic is better than no probiotic. And so, kefir's a great way to go, if that's what you got.
Now, tell us about the history of kefir and where this actually came from.
Definitely. So, this is a good point. There are two different cultures that are called kefir, and they're totally different. So, one of them is juice kefir. It's also called tibicos is a common name for it. African bees is a common name for it. There's another one which is dairy kefir, and this is a totally different group probiotic. So the juice kefir is available all around the world, and I think it probably developed in several different climates because it is kind of a simple, probiotic profile. Dairy kefir, not so much. That did come from one place in the world, which is the Caucasus Mountains in Russia, and is again, this is one of the ways that they preserve milk. And I heard an interesting story that in that region over the centuries, they would milk their cows, then they would put it in a leather pouch and hang it in the doorway. And the reason is because that was the most commonly used area in the house. Every time somebody walked by, they would have to move it out of the way or smack it or swing it or whatever, and this would help mix it. So this would keep all of it, the proper pH to preserve their milk so that they could continue to, so it would never go bad. So they found that the health benefits were amazing. This is one of the longest lived populations in the world, regularly living to over 100 years old, and kefir is one of the reasons that people say as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, kefir, as you describe in your book, is probably the highest in the probiotic content, isn't it? Kefir milk, that is? Or dairy kefir?
I have actually never tested dairy kefir. So I would be really curious to find out. That's definitely a big gap in my research here.
Well, it seems that I was on a website, and I think it was Cultures for Life or Cultures for Health. I can't remember which one. Yeah. And I remember that's what they were talking about, that water kefir is pretty good. I mean, it's better than not having any probiotics at all, and it's real easy to make, as you were talking about earlier, and I can attest to that as I've been making it now for more than a month. But that, if you really wanted to get a superior one, that dairy kefir was a good way to go. But the other interesting thing, too, about dairy kefir is the diversity of which you can begin to use that kefired dairy milk, for instance, going into cheese and things like that. Tell us about that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, if you have a strong culture, then you can add that to pretty much anything you want, and it'll start to break it down. You can put dairy kefir or kombucha in with your sauerkraut, and it'll just continue to ferment. Just add different probiotics. The strongest ones will survive, and so that's best for you. I always will throw multiple cultures in when I'm doing stuff. I make kombucha, kimchi all the time. And it's just really delicious, and it just helps break it down. And so I think maybe a good point to make right now is what fermentation actually does to food, which is that food is made up of molecules, and it goes into our digestive system, and we make enzymes to break it down. We also hopefully chew it up really well, and then it goes into our digestive system. We try to extract nutrients from it. So what happens when stuff gets fermented is the bacteria will already start that process. It'll break molecular bonds, like the one in caffeine, when we're making kombucha. It'll break that bond, so our body no longer recognizes it as caffeine, and so we can use those atoms and those new molecules as energy or in different ways. So when we add a brine to sauerkraut and let the natural lactobacillus on the surface of the leaves go to work, or even add a dairy kefir, juice kefir, kombucha, or whatever else to that, they'll all go to work and start breaking that stuff down. And, if you eat raw sauerkraut, a lot of people are going to have trouble digesting that. It's going to be a little rumbly in their stomach, and so it's really cool because the probiotics will start to break down the starches and other difficult to digest nutrients, so that when we get it, it's much simpler, much easier to digest, much more assimilable. The nutrients are more bioavailable, plus it's just super delicious.
And it's a lot of fun doing this, as you definitely have been saying and describing in your book as well. You also start taking on, it's just kind of having fun with this, but a Walter White sort of approach to this. Instead of breaking bad, though, you're breaking good.
Oh. Okay, I didn't follow that.
Didn't get the reference. Walter White, yeah, but Breaking Bad to Breaking Good sort of a thing there. But
Breaking Good. I like that.
We're breaking good. That was actually something my wife said last night. I was having fun kind of doing a Walter White imitation on this as I was brewing up another batch of kefir water, and it was just funny because this time what I did is I ran short on sugar, And so I probably had enough to maybe make about 3/4 of a pint. So what I did is I finished it off. I think it's a 2-quart jar that I was using it in. So I just poured, that pomo juice that you can buy, that pomegranate juice, just right into it. Because what that'll do, with fruit juices, as you were describing, is it converts that sugar over to a probiotic. So get your favorite fruit juice, and there you go.
Well, you guys, sounds like you guys have a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, it is, and that's just it. It starts getting you more intrigued into science and how things work. Those things we were forced to, for most of us anyway, to try to learn in school. But as you get older, it's sort of like history. You didn't care as a kid about history, but you get older and it becomes interesting and important now all of a sudden. So, and the same way with this, with fermenting food here as well. Now, there was one more I wanted to bring up, which I found really interesting because I didn't know this as well. Tell us about Rejuvelac.
Sure. Well, that's really cool because you don't actually. So all the things that we've talked about: kombucha, John, kefir, apple cider vinegar. You have to get a starter from somewhere of these bacteria. The kombucha it started in one gentleman's pot in the back room of an herb shop in China. So the story goes. The dairy kefir comes right from the Caucasus Mountains in northern Russia. But what's cool about Rejuvelac is that you're just using the natural probiotics and yeasts and things that are in the air and already on the seed that you're going to be fermenting. Kind of the same thing with sauerkraut. It's what's already there. So you don't need anything beyond just what you have. So Rejuvelac is really cool because it's the only beverage that I know that you can do that with. And what it is you sprout seeds or grains of whatever type. It's traditionally people use wheat, but you can use quinoa, sunflower seeds, peas, whatever you want, because everything is covered in bacteria, right? So you sprout it, and that starts the breakdown of the enzyme inhibitors, the starches, and the things that keep all that life force under lock and key. So you sprout it, then you put it in water and cover it with a cloth so that it can breathe, but bugs can't get in. Leave it for a couple of days. All those naturally occurring lactobacillus and mosquitobacter that are on the seeds, on the sprouts, are going to start fermenting, and they're going to turn that water into this delicious kind of slightly maybe yeasty lemonade. And I have yet to test Rejuvelac as well for probiotic content, but I know it's up there. Plus, it's so easy. It's totally free. Anybody really buying any sodas or any Starbucks or anything like that is just kind of a waste of, this incredible nutrition and probiotic gift that you can be getting from your own kitchen.
Well, it's very exciting to know that you have these books out there, and again, the simplicity. I mean, these were ones I was reading, it seemed like, within an hour or two. Just really fascinating what you have in there. And cool. The biggest message that I really like about what you have is it gets back to a very holistic approach, especially when it comes to nutrition. And the holistic approach is you begin to learn about it, you put your hands on it, and you start getting involved in it, so you're proactive. And then, thirdly, the benefits that yield are very holistic as well. We tend to live in a society, especially in America, where you get all these health experts that basically break everything down into individual components. We need more vitamin B12, we need more of this, we need more of that. And it gets to a point where we start finding ourselves shopping for the concentration of what we think will bring us the greatest benefit. CoQ10, all this nonsense that you have out there. And what I love about this is it gives you the holistic approach. It isn't just one thing, but it's a balance of many natural live things, and that's very exciting.
Absolutely. Daniel, it was less than 100 years ago that scientists figured out that food has carbohydrates, fats, and proteins in it. Once they figured that out, they said, we're done. We know everything about food. That's it. Then a couple decades later, vitamins were discovered, and they said, oh, that's it. We know everything, So there's been a progression there. Now people are focused on, phytonutrients or whatever it is, but we are far from being complete. So when we break stuff down to individual vitamins, minerals, or whatever it is that we think we need. We're severely limiting our kind of innate wisdom. People have been fermenting for as long as there's been people. And if we stick to the natural approaches, we take a look at what indigenous cultures are doing, then we're going to make sure that we, like you said, get a holistic approach. Actually, back to the Rejuvelac thing, one thing that I'm really excited about is that our Simple Foods supports the foundation, Simple Foundation, and we've just launched our first project, which is providing probiotic nutrition and education to an orphanage in Uganda. So what we're doing is sending these buckets out that have a water filter, that's a ceramic filter so that they can always have access to clean water, a bag of seeds, instructions, the sprouting bag, etc., so that we can send them off to the orphanage. Kids can learn about sprouting. They can learn about fermenting by making Rejuvelac, get these probiotics in their system. It can increase their mental functioning, their immune system, all the stuff that we've talked about, and they can be in a position to help contribute to global abundance, to help create some of the answers that we need as a society. I mean, we need everybody's help. And people in Africa don't have this infrastructure holding them back. India is going to be the next region that we target for these projects. So, these billions of people in these areas, just by being supported by what all of our ancestors have been doing for the tens of thousands of years, they don't need to know about vitamins and minerals and nutraceuticals and all this stuff. They just need to get healthy bacteria in their system, have fun doing it, and thrive.
As we say, it's good to get back to basics, and the basics can become very complex, but then again, so is the experience and the knowledge you begin gaining as you get involved in doing these things, such as fermenting our own food. Now, John, is there a website that people can go to discover more?
Yeah, definitely. Check out the simplefoods.com, which I've repeated ad nauseum on this interview. It's sympleFoods.com. Also, I'm really excited that the fourth book in this series is just about a week from being released on Amazon.
Exciting.
The Kitchen Sink Farming series. Book 1 is about sprouting. Book 2 is about fermenting. Book 3 is about growing food indoors. And then this fourth book is about what to do with all of your sprouts and krauts and everything you've made in the previous books. Homegrown living recipe.
Now, here's a quick side note, too, because it was funny how the timing of this experience came along with your books. So it was about 2.5 months, maybe I want to say about 2.5 months ago, I bought a tomato, an organic tomato as it proclaimed. It was labeled organic. Came home, never used it, and it was sitting out in my fruit basket. And it sat there, and I was kind of curious, and what was interesting about it is that it never seemed to start moldy or, getting wet and do what tomatoes typically do. Mm. And then all of a sudden it started getting bumpy on the skin, and I'm like, well, that's weird. Huh. And the next thing you know, I started seeing a sprout leaf come out of it, and I said, now, that's something I have never seen from a tomato that you get from a store, ever. So I'm thinking, well, this thing must really be organic. So I let it sit there literally for pretty close to 2 months, just as it started sprouting, man. My wife was saying, that's awfully weird looking, it kind of gives me the creeps. So I decided, what the heck, I already had a pot of really good soil, why not throw that tomato in? And right now I'm trying to figure out and see what happens.
Cool. Oh, I love it. That's so fun.
But it came along at the same time that we started coming to know you and your kitchen sink farming, and I thought, hey, what the heck? But that's the fun thing about this is that you put the fun in it, and then you see what you really reap, out of all this, and you start taking more of a proactive approach to your health, to your nutrition. This stuff isn't rocket science. Get away from the experts that are breaking it all down and all these components, and you'll realize that it's not only a lot of fun, but you're starting to really live more off the food grid, so to speak, so you really know how you're feeling. It's pretty exciting stuff.
Definitely.
Well, Jean-Pierre, thank you so much for joining us here on the program today. And for the listeners, go ahead and give out your website one more time.
Sure. Simplefoods.com, SYMPLE Foods.com. the books Kitchen Sink Farming are available on Amazon and our website and various stores around Portland.
And definitely enjoyable reads, to say the least, that's for sure. Jean-Pierre, thank you again for joining us on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Have a good one.
We want to thank you, the listeners out there. You can also be proactive by visiting us at our website, which is beyond50radio.com, the number 50. Please subscribe to our free weekly e-newsletter as well. You can also follow us on Twitter at Beyond 50 Radio, as well as Facebook. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past